please, 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 please stay with this basic block out phase as long as you can. It will save you so much time in the future, so much doubting, so much frustration if you have a really good solid foundation to work off of. The very, very first thing I'm going to do before I start really getting into the basic block out is I'm going to bring in a human like scaled person into my scene, so I have kind of a reference as I'm building. Even from this point, I'm trying to be super cautious about what I'm adding into the scene, like detail wise, because the more vertices you have, the slower everything's gonna go. You're gonna be more likely to face crashes, and your render time is gonna go up significantly. And we're just up in the blocking phase, so even now I'm going to add a decimate modifier to this very simple model, just because I know that I won't need any extra vertices. And already this model is going to do what it was intended to do, which is just be there as a scale. It doesn't need to be like the perfect person. It just needs to kind of vaguely look like how tall a person would be. So I'm going to just set it there, and then we'll get started with I started with adding a plane. Sometimes I won't. Sometimes I'll just go right into the blocking, basic blocking for buildings. It just depends on what you're doing. A lot of the times I find if I have a plane, I'll get stressed out about like how tall the buildings are supposed to be, instead of just generally feeling out like where the buildings are in my frame. Again, it's like something to get used to, but you have to remember you're not building the whole world here. You're just building what your camera sees. So you want to give the illusion that there's a ground, right? But you don't, if you're not pointed towards the ground, then you don't need the ground, right? Like in this specific scene, I probably didn't need the plane because I'm going to be just doing like an overhead, like kind of like upper building view, right? So just a quick reminder, Shift A is how you add things into your scene. So you go Shift A, you go to Mesh, and then there'll be a drop-down menu which has all the primitive shapes. That's how I got my plane, and that's how I got my cubes. And then after I've imported the cube, I usually just duplicate it with Shift D. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to get too into the hotkeys, but if you would like me to make a video about the most common hotkeys that I use, I'd be very happy to. I'm going to try my best to stay in this viewport for as long as I can, and just modeling and staying here, because the minute I get into materials, sometimes I get carried away and it can be kind of hard to come back to this part of the phase of building your scene. I want to talk about the silhouette. I think that's super important, especially if you're doing city building. It's a good place to start if you're not sure like where to go with city building. It's like you need to remember you're not building an entire world. You're literally just building the world that your camera sees. So you need you're going to build the illusion of depth, and you're going to build the illusion that it's a world, and that's all great. But you're not building everything from the ground up, and you shouldn't try to. It's not gonna work. You're not gonna be able to render that again. So the best thing you can do is have your camera ready and focus on composition. Like what does it see? What's the silhouette of the city? Step 2 is like modeling, but it's still kind of very basic block out modeling. I'm really not going to get into really, really detailed stuff until I'm sure how the light's going to look and how all that jazz is looking. So for now, I'm going to say step 2 is using modifiers, which is mainly just the array modifier, and continuing to move stuff around. Make sure the silhouettes look good. Make sure there's like enough kind of visual information closer to the camera, and keeping in mind that, you know, not everything is going to be seen. It's just it might just be a really quick glimpse at a building in the back. So like don't spend too much time on perfecting everything until you know what it's going to look like when the scene has really come together, because that's when you can start adding details, and it's worth it because you're actually going to know that you're going to see them. I'm not really trying to like get into materials quite yet, but begrudgingly I do have to go into the materials preview and kind of get into the materials tab, just for the sake of organization. Before I add my array modifiers, like before I apply them, I like to make sure I have all of my windows selected on like the story I'm working on, and then when I apply them, I'll go back into edit mode, and I can see that all of the windows will have been selected for me. So after I do that, I'll separate them from the building, and I'll apply just a general color for all of the windows that I'm doing. Like I'll go and I'll create it in my materials tab of the properties editor. I'll label it glass building material 1, and then I'm going to turn it a nice blue. And I might, switch up the windows. They might look different on different buildings, but for now, I'm just going to do that so that I know that those are selected and I don't have to worry about it. I'm going to try my best to stay within the structure of the steps that I'm going to be doing, but it is a creative process, and sometimes I'll be jumping back to modifiers once I've gone back to it's a process. You go back and forth a little bit, but just as a general sense of a starting point, it's really important to do your block out first and really stick with that for as long as you can. For real, it's so important. Do not get caught up in the nitty-gritty. Okay, don't get caught up in the details, especially not at this stage. There will be time for you later to worry about the small stuff, but right now all you need to do is make sure that the general silhouette makes sense. In the same breath that I'm applying materials to the windows and separating them from the buildings, and also applying the arrays or any modifiers I've used, I'm also going to be applying some colors to the buildings themselves, just so that I kind of have a general idea of how many colors I want, how many materials I'm going to need to do. So I'm going to do, I think I've done 3 or 4 now. It's just building material 1, 2, and 3. And I'm just going to randomly apply them. A really great shortcut that I love is if you've selected a bunch of items, a bunch of objects using Shift and just clicking on them, if you press Control L, you will be able to, there'll be a drop-down menu and it'll say link/transfer data. And if you press link materials, then the last selected item, so it'll be orange, will kind of transfer the material to whatever else you've pressed. So it's really good if you don't feel like going and actually separately doing all of that. It's really, really awesome, and it saves a lot. Okay, so this is generally kind of a good block out. I've applied all the the array modifiers. There looks like there's enough asymmetry going on where I don't feel like there's too much repetition, even though I have done a lot of duplicating, which I highly recommend. Just duplicate and move stuff around until it makes sense. I think we're ready to get into lighting. In the next part, I'll be going over lighting and probably getting started with some materials, really getting into it. And yeah, if you enjoyed and you want to stay tuned for that, subscribe. Thank you.